Hey, I'm getting ready for MangoCon, so because of that, I'm running down my phone battery, and because of that, I'm taking videos, and because of that, it is time to do the month in review for MangoLassi. Now, strangely, we've had pretty good activity this month, and I've said this a lot, right? We get really good posting and our views go way down, and then we get very little posting and our views go way up. It's really weird how inversely connected those appear to be just in general. Like, it's all over the map. I don't know. I don't know what makes it like that. But we were riding at about 10 months of record highs, and now we're at extremely low views for the last month. It's really dropped off in the last 2 weeks, I would say, but for the whole last month, it's been super low comparatively. I mean, we're in the millions, right? It's I think and Cloudflare is a much better number, right? Because Cloudflare always registers the same thing, and our internal systems register certain types of behavior, and so depending on changes in the platform and the changes in caching and changes in viewing behavior and changes in tools being used to view, will dramatically change what our one set of numbers are versus the other. So on the internal numbers, we're showing a drop by about 2/3 since maybe 3 months ago. But on Cloudflare, we're noticing only a change of about 15%, maybe 20% tops, but probably about 15%. So Cloudflare suggests that what we're seeing is a change in technological behavior of how people are surfing the site or whatever. That's probably based more on our update to the latest NodeBB platform rather than an actual change in the number of people coming to the site. Given the number of people joining the site and given the number of like the SEO that we're seeing and the amount of posting that we're seeing, that makes sense that Cloudflare is staying pretty flat because we're noticing things stay very steady as busy, not crazy, but quite busy. So that seems pretty sensible. And talking to some of our partners who have some hooks into things, they've been seeing consistent stuff. For example, many of you see that there are Vultr ads on the site. Vultr gives some detailed statistics, and their stuff is a flat line. Like, for months, it has been absolutely the same. Pretty decent amount of traffic coming through to them from the site, so that suggests that it really is relatively flat. All right, we're going to do, though, the month wrap-up because I've been so busy. This month has been nuts. I can't believe I haven't had a chance to do a video in so long. I haven't had a chance to do anything. So here we go, starting with all posts with 30 or more, all threads with 30 or more posts for the month. Woo! Starting with WRX7M, creating a shortcut for Chrome Incognito with proxy settings. I'll be honest, I haven't really looked at this thread a whole heck of a lot, but it is pretty much what it says, but there's 30 posts discussing it. It hasn't been active for the last 2 weeks, but quite a bit there. Asvaldo, who is with NTG Bolivia, asked 2 or 3 screens. What is your choice? Or just one? Little lively discussion there, and a lot of views of people just talking about what their setup is in the office. Those are always fun discussions to kind of see what people do. This looks like IRJ. It is, with cannot SSH using public key. Technical SSH troubleshooting there. Then my first one on the list from over 2 weeks ago, Virt Manager for Windows. This one had 200 views, a lot of lively discussion. I think it's really good because really got into looking at how to run graphical tools from the Linux ecosystem on Linux subsystem for Windows. So this was technical and really did some troubleshooting for us, like solved real problems. And I can see this being used for a lot of people. And thanks to everyone who helped me out on that one, because there was some stuff I hadn't thought of running Xming or another X client or X server, on Windows, and that ran just beautifully. Like, absolutely works exactly the same as if you're on Linux. Super easy to do, using in my case Ubuntu with the Linux subsystem for Windows. Really a great way to approach that. So that was super, and I think there was a lot of value in that one. Even if it's not something you're looking at, pop in. That one's I definitely think a good one to take a look at. Next up, me again, Linux options for Dell PowerEdge 2950 Mark II. Yeah, I got to do a couple of deployments of ancient hardware this past month. These, I've also been doing some HP C7000 work. Oh my gosh, that stuff is terrible, and nothing is documented. Run away. Like, I've always warned people about blades, but let me tell you, the C7000, now that it's most of a decade old, is so much worse than when blades were new. Because at least when they were new, you were calling up HP and, like, getting matching parts. Now, it's like getting stuff off of eBay. Nothing matches. Nothing's documented because they assumed that no one would ever do this kind of stuff. And now there's no one who remembers what goes with what or how to get it together. And there's so many moving parts that you have to think about. You have to think about the chassis, the power supply. The data center didn't have available power for this thing. That alone, trying to figure out how we could get by with enough power to turn on the blades alone was a big problem. Figuring out how to rack the thing was a big problem. Figuring out what blades they had was a big problem. Every single piece of the system had a password that nobody knew because it was all used equipment, right? So they didn't know the blade passwords, they didn't know the ILO passwords, they didn't know the chassis password. They may have known that one. They didn't know the switch passwords. They didn't put the switches in correctly. They didn't tell us they were switches. All kinds of stuff. So the amount of just days of just trying to track down how to access the machine, completely nuts. Old equipment is always going to come with some amount of problems, but blades are the kind of equipment that are never meant to go old. And it was supposed to be a one-day install. It's been a month, and we're just starting to get to the point where we know what hardware to order to put it together. That's how bad it is. Anyway, the Dell PowerEdge 2950s, not nearly as dramatic, but we wanted to put Fedora 30 on them, and that did not work. Maybe it could have been made to do it somehow, but whatever. Ubuntu 19.4 worked great, no problems at all. Those are up and running and in production. MS Audit, Psycho 24. Psycho 24? Who knows? Talking about Microsoft SAM audits. Good discussion. Don't get scammed. Read these things, because this is the kind of discussion where loads and loads of great information, that peer communications between IT pros, makes all the difference. If you're working on your own in a little shop, chances are you will get hit with Microsoft audit scams or semi-scams all the time, and you will have no idea that these things aren't real. But you come in to a community like this and you discuss these things, and you realize that everyone's getting these scams, and that there are lots of people who have experience with them and know how to deal with them, and know what to look out for. And some of these, like SAM audits, we can just avoid them, right? They're not real. You can just walk away, but they do such a good job of that if you don't have these resources, you wouldn't know. So great one there. MS Audit, question mark, question mark, question mark. Next up, Brandon 220, not to be confused with Apollo 440. This is about half that. 38 posts on choosing KVM over Hyper-V. Good discussion there. Less than a week ago, just looking at why would you choose KVM versus Hyper-V, and I think pretty much the thread came out to, when would you choose Hyper-V, right? No, there's lots of good times to have Hyper-V, but KVM definitely, I think, came out as something that several people are trying because of that. Next up, concerns with ButterFS and REFS, or REFS, or Reefs, and maybe it's BetterFS. Never call it BetterFS. I hate that. It's not better than anything, and it wasn't supposed to be better than anything. And who knows what? Everyone calls it Butter, right? It's ButterFS because it's dumb to call it anything else, and it's taking way too long to get it to the point where it could even be comparable to FS, right? If you're gonna, you can't call it better until it's kind of better, and it's nowhere close. Not that it's bad, it's fine. Just call it Butter, and then you don't have this like comparative thing. But it's really trying to go after ZFS, and ZFS is pretty amazing and has been around for pushing 20 years. That's not true, 14 years. And so you're not gonna just come out and beat ZFS. Long term, Butter might be better, but for a long time yet, it's not going to be. And REFS, we should not come up with things to call it. REFS is short enough, right? But that whole family of ZFS derivatives, or ZFS wannabes, whatever you want to call them, things inspired by ZFS, has a lot of problems and should not be deployed nearly as broadly as people like to think that maybe they should, right? There's a real drive towards people wanting to roll out this type of file system simply because they think it's the future, and in reality, it's not. Right? There's lots of great reasons for it to exist. It's not that the concepts are bad. It's that it's not a panacea, right? It's a specific type of use case, and you just have to find the right times to use those technologies. All right. Why do email readers always default to oldest email first? This is one for me, and pretty much just me whining about how all my clients on Linux, every time I install one, Thunderbird and ilk, I'm looking at you. Why do you always show me email in the dumbest possible way? I don't ever want to see that. I don't know anyone who wants to see email that way. I mean, it's fine that you offer it as an option, but why is it the default when it's nobody's default? All right. What happens when Microsoft doesn't issue licenses? By the way, my battery's down to 5%, which is awesome. I got to get it down to 0, and we're getting there. This is one we had a huge problem with Microsoft. And so I've got quite a few in here. I guess I often do. It's not a big deal. That Microsoft did not issue licenses when we ordered them through the Volume Licensing Center created a huge disaster that went on and on and on. It took over 6 months to get resolved. And in the end, it turned out that the real issue is that Microsoft does not have good processes around licensing, right? They have huge potential risks and breaks in the system, and that's one of the reasons why licensing is of big concern, right? You should be concerned about licensing, how it impacts your business, which I think would be a great conference talk at some point. I'm definitely going to have it as a Sam IT video, but licensing carries risks, and Microsoft doesn't do licensing very well. Most of the time it works. Most of the time anything works, right? But we got to see what happens when it doesn't work and just how dramatically it didn't work. The underlying cause turned out to be that somebody at Microsoft's partner, the reseller, quit and took the account information with them, never passed it on. And so the mechanisms that Microsoft uses to work through just normal account stuff didn't work. Microsoft lost track of the thing because they don't really have an end-to-end management. They just send out an email. Email goes into a black hole. That black hole is not a person anymore. That person leaves. Tough. The whole thing falls apart, and there's no mechanism for getting it back. This was weeks. It was several months of the reseller and several weeks of the reseller plus Microsoft working together, and they eventually had the product just time out. We actually had an outage of several days because Microsoft could not determine how to issue a license, right? And that was Microsoft on the phone, could not figure it out, nor could they figure out where to direct us to or how to get the license. They didn't even have good documentation on how to get the licenses, even if they worked, right? Like, people do this all the time, so there must be people who know how to do it, but there's also a group of people who don't know how to do it, who are in the official path. And so if you get them and they guide you to the wrong place, you're potentially stuck, and it's quite a problem. Dave247 with, I don't get the point of SAN snapshots. And I think what a lot of people decided to say is, we don't either. Not really, but SAN snapshots are often oversold as this miracle cure, snake oil kind of thing, and they're simply an underlying mechanism for other things, and when used appropriately, they're completely appropriate, and when you think that they're magic, they're obviously a bunch of crap, right? So, as with everything in IT, it has its place, and it's not a miracle cure, right? So, but good discussion there that really digs into, like, how and why and how that really comes out. It was good technical discussion. Jimmy 9008 with Dell MD 1220 RAID 5 rebuild question. Good long thread about how to deal with RAID after a failure has happened. Obsolescence with need headphones. Nothing crazy there. Looking for a pair of headphones. Lots of people talking about what headphones they like. Jimmy 9008 again. VLAN on Dell N4064 stacked. Not one I participated in too much, but exactly what it sounds like, how to do VLANs when you're stacked on those switches. Next up is me with Joplin, an open source note application with Nextcloud Sync. I've been using this even today. It's pretty cool. I really like the application. If you haven't played with it yet, Joplin is available on like every platform. It's free. It's open source. It'll sync through lots of things, including the file system and OneDrive and Dropbox. But for me, I use Nextcloud, and it syncs to that great. Goes right to my phone, right to my desktop. I love it. So I've been using that a lot in the last several weeks since I did this post, and a lot of people have been checking it out. And 321 views on that one. That one got popular really quickly. Then we had a spam post, top 10 advantages of using WordPress for website development. The post may have been spam, and we took out the spam links, but in reality, it turned into a good discussion where people were talking about why they didn't like WordPress, and really, okay, so I was part of the discussion, so I don't want to like put in too much insight, but I feel like it was pretty clear when using WordPress correctly, it's an amazing product. And when you use it for something it's not meant to be used for, when used incorrectly, it doesn't seem like the right product. That goes without saying for anything, right? Like, so the negatives to it weren't really negatives, right? Like, I need a hammer. This hamburger sucks. That's because it's not a hammer. That's not a negative of a hamburger. It's a misuse of a hamburger. Anyway, it was a good discussion and dug into a lot of stuff. Next up, Defire. How would you build a file server with 170 terabytes of usable storage? 51 posts, lots of good stuff talking about what happens when storage gets big. How would you do it in the real world if you didn't have any random constraints from some project that's already underway. Next up is me for upgrade to Fedora 30. Strangely, 51 posts talking about upgrading, because some people did have problems, but Fedora 30 released in the last month, and a lot of people have been updating to it. I've been running on it since day one. AMD versus Intel by Hobbit666. Quite a bit of activity there as people look at which processors you should be considering, especially now that Intel has some supply chain issues. So a lot of manufacturers are turning to AMD again, and AMD seems to be in a really good place. And so a lot of people trying to dig into the value proposition. How much are you getting for your dollar with AMD versus Intel? What potential risks or negatives do you have? That kind of stuff. All right. This one from minutes ago, 54 post. Fedora Salt Master new installation. And I haven't even seen the latest post on that because Dustin B3403 is currently posting about that as we speak. And he's chatting with me. I haven't gotten to that yet either. Sorry, Dustin. Next up, run Vert Manager on Windows 10. I swear I already talked about that. I'm not sure why it came up twice, or maybe I am losing my mind. Anyway, I'm going to just skip that one, but great discussion if I didn't already talk about that. Eddie Jennings, infrastructure needed for hypervisor cluster. This is 80 posts, a whole big thing digging into what is needed to build a cluster. This is for, I believe, a home lab that he was building. He was looking to really understand how you could learn about clustering in that setting. Next up, obsolescence, comparing PowerShell to Linux user manipulation. I think we had a lot of good discussion about shells and digging into like what exactly is a shell, what exactly is a scripting language, what exactly are these things, because so many of these discussions get tied up. And there's a newer one that isn't on this list, but we were looking at Microsoft just released their new terminal, or the terminal. I'm not sure what it's called, but there's a brand new, pretty sweet looking terminal application for Windows. And it's amazing how many of the things that people assume are problems with the command shell or problems with PowerShell are actually that its default terminal is kind of crappy. And they have this new terminal that looks pretty slick. I bet people who are, often reticent to use some of those Microsoft command line tools are going to be like, whoa, I guarantee you're going to hear it. They implemented Linux, right? Because yet again, another thing that people can't identify what it is they're talking about or looking at. They see something that looks similar in some way to something they accidentally misconstrued as being something else, and then they associate them. But there was a lot of digging into which things are the shell, which things are not the shell, which things are things the shell is calling, which things are the operating system versus all that kind of stuff. It was a good discussion. Another one for me, does anyone actually use Conversation View intentionally for email? And it turns out some people do. Who knew? Not me. I certainly didn't know. And I definitely don't use it intentionally. Next up for me, shell speeds, Bash, and PowerShell. This is really a continuation of the other one, or vice versa, so all part of the same discussion about how some shells are noticeably slower than others, and that really caused a lot of digging into. I was talking about the shell, but a lot of people responded to things being fast or slow that weren't the shell, and so we had to dig into exactly which things were the shell and how to identify that. Another one that's currently going on, Windows 10 reboots by W.R. Combs. Check that one out. Actually trying to solve a problem with Windows 10 rebooting. Really big, busy one at 139 posts and nearly 200 views. SkyTel auto-enables billable services without notice. That was not the original title of that thread. That thread got a lot of attention and a lot of action very quickly, but dug into misunderstandings, got, I think both sides, a lot of communications happened, and it was a good example of how vendors can be integrated into the community and can both sides can find value from having that discussion, even when the discussion may not be as ideal as we hoped. I think there was a lot of good stuff that happened there. Next one, this is our biggest views for the week from Jared. Oh, and that one is from Jared Bush. Next up, also from Jared Bush, email server options. 818 views, 149 posts on this one thread that is still going a little bit. I mean, it's been idle for most of a week, but that implies there's likely to be something yet. And looking at Zimbra, Zoho, Exchange, Mail Cow, lots of people jumping in with ideas, lots of people discussing what they like and don't like with different things, pricing, what different costs are. That one is really good. At 151 posts, but nearly a month old, so this one's definitely gotten quiet. Where to read code or best practices to learn code, also by W.R. Combs, who was in the list one other time. A lot of people pointing him towards Python, trying to explain what is code, like Python and PHP, and what isn't code, like HTML and CSS, helping to understand what it is he's really looking to do. It's a good read. It's a good one to participate in because it forces you to kind of think about coding and what really is coding and what your goals are when you're looking at learning to code, something that many people do. They have to kind of figure that out. And at number 1 for the month, it's been idle for 2 weeks, so it had 209 posts all in one day, pretty much. Jimmy 9008 with RAID 10 must use or another RAID limits. That one just a bunch of digging into RAID performance, RAID risks, all kinds of stuff, right? So that was a good one that got a lot of attention. Looked at rebuild times with different types of RAIDs, and I'm actually going to read this one just because we have a few minutes left. Hi folks, I'm looking at an array of 24 by 14 terabyte drives in RAID 10. Any reason to avoid that? It meets my capacity needs, but not sure where the limit of RAID 6 on the line to use RAID 10 sits. Jim. So this is the one that also spawned the other one that's talking about doing big storage in a single box, because this is a giant amount of storage in a single box. So he's talked about, is any RAID good at that size? Is there any situation where you really want to do this project at all? How big can you go in a single box? What kind of box are you going to have to get? How much RAID overhead? We talked about a lot of things. It's a good one at 209 posts. A lot of stuff being dug into. All right, that is the month in MangoLassi world. That's our top stuff. I know I get a lot of requests for these videos, and I just don't have time to do them. So sorry, but here's one, and the battery is about to die. Perfect timing. I'm going to get this plugged in and charging for MangoCon, and I will see the people at MangoCon in 90 minutes.